All I can say is, wow. I can't express how grateful and honored I am, and my family is, of this wonderful honor. The fact that Norfolk Street's primary purpose is to house formerly homeless folks is especially meaningful to me and our family. I deserve only modest credit for the acquisition of Norfolk back in the day. Lansing Fair, the developer, David Conover, the architect, and especially the incomparable Pam Shea of New Communities were drivers of this effort in 1974 and 75. On the CHA side, Harry Spence and Howard Cohen fostered the purchase / acquisition of Norfolk through the DCA, the Department of Community Affairs, as a turnkey when such a program didn't exist. And it's notable that Howard's wife, Myra Musicant, became years later the chair of New Communities at Board of Directors. And we should never forget the many years of great service and leadership performed by the special and sadly all too early deceased Roberta Campbell. Now, the long-winded, selfish part of my tenure at CHA. During my time as CHA director, speeches most often made were called PowerPoint presentations, replete with electronic graphics and other forms of technology. Being the fossil that I was, and still am, increasingly, I was incapable of such and instead offered what I called ballpoint presentations. You are about to witness and hopefully participate in what may very well be my last ballpoint presentation. First, let me say that if memory serves, which it often does not, the CHA board had a policy of not naming a building after someone until that person passed away, for fear that the individual might do something illegal or immoral later in life and thus stain his or her name and the building which bore that name. Since the CHA has named this beautiful building after me, I wonder if you all know something about my health and longevity. That said, let me start by acknowledging that whatever accomplishments exist as a result of my tenure at CHA are the result of the input of so many others that the theme of this ballpoint presentation is what I call ITAT, which stands for It Takes a Team.
Yes.
And my team started with my family. My mother, who was the primary parent in our family because my father worked on the road 80% of each month. So mom essentially raised 3 rambunctious boys and a daughter herself. For example, she used to hang a lamp outside of our second floor so my older brothers and I could play night football in our backyard. Later, she dealt with and refuted racist neighbors who complained that a black man was a regular visitor to our house. He was a personal coach who redirected my brother Jack's angry and sometimes aberrant behavior to sports. And Jack became a star football, basketball, and baseball player who went to college on a full scholarship because of that. My oldest brother, Jim, taught me how to play football and baseball, and most importantly, convinced me to attend college after my serving 2 years in the Army after high school. My dear friend and brother-in-law, Miles Mahoney, introduced me to civil rights and the housing profession back in the late 1960s. My wife and mother of our 3 daughters, Margot, who, like my mother, took the major responsibility for raising our kids while I worked my long hours, like many of you. Then in my housing career, which started in Philadelphia, as stated in the handout materials, I was mentored by my best friend and brother-in-law, Miles Mahoney, and Philadelphia housing czar, whose name was Gordon Kavanaugh. My Cambridge tenure team is somewhat complex and certainly multitudinous. It starts with city manager Jim Sullivan and later Bob Healy, who helped install the CHA Reform Board of Directors in the early 1970s, which included Jerry Clark, Eileen Henry, Norman Watson, Irving Tobin, along with state appointee Jim Stockard. Over time, outstanding residents like Ruth Pelletier, Juanita Daniels, and Jackie Adams became board members. This would not have happened without the support from city councilors, especially Sandra Graham, Barbara Ackerman, Alice Wolfe, David Sullivan, Tim Toomey, Michael Sullivan, and more recently, Marjorie Decker. Also very helpful and supportive were deputy city managers at the time, like Rich Rossi and Jill Harold and Ellen Semenoff of Human Services. That Reform Board of Directors hired the incomparable Harry Spence as its executive director, who then hired Howard Cohen as general counsel, Elspeth Taylor as director of fiscal affairs, and yours truly, among others. In short, the support I received from all these board members was amazing. When I was president of CLAFA, this is after I became the director, I would frequently have conversations with other housing authority executive directors whose boards often changed policy directives and were nowhere near as supportive of their EDs as was the CHA board with me. I was exceptionally blessed by a loyal, hardworking, and innovative staff during my tenure. John Kane, a long-time tenant advocate, morphed into an outstanding director of the management department. And after his untimely early passing, his deputy, Gloria Leipzig, stepped up with very similar results. Under the leadership of John and Gloria, many excellent management employees contributed to the, quote, well-being of our residents and the developments. Among them were, just to name a few, Jethro Curry, Mike Innemer, Pat Sullivan, Roxanne Davies, Faith Walker, Ralph Guerrieri, Josh Meehan, Tori Gonzalez, and George Gannon, to name just a few. Jack Plunkett fostered tenant relations, and his work, especially at Roosevelt Towers, was instrumental in changing the trajectory of that troubled development. The ultimate result was the total rehab of the high-rise tower, which was vacant, if you remember. When I ascended as CEO from the Planning and Development Department, Frederick Bucky Putnam became the new director of P&D and did an exceptional job of building the overall effectiveness of that department. Later, after Bucky left, Bill Ewell and then John Stainton became directors of P&D. And John played an important role in convincing me of the benefits to be had if we were somewhat deregulated as a result of embracing the Moving to Work program. And the rest of that story is history. Then Terry Dumas became the Director of Planning and Development.
Yes, Terry.
And I can only say that her tenure in that position exhibited the best performance of any staff person ever.
All right.
Since Terry's retirement, P&D has not skipped a beat under the remarkable stewardship of Margaret Donnelly Moran. One of my first hires at CHA was Reese Fade, who is here, who we hired to staff the then relatively new Section 8 program. As expected, Reese did an outstanding job and has since moved on to the capital national scene. After a long time, leasing and occupancy director George Use retired, we hired Marcy Fisher, who also moved on to Washington, D.C. Marcy was succeeded as L&O, leasing and occupancy director, by Anna Rada, who had to convince me to hire a young man named Mike Johnston as a deputy. Despite Mike's many accounts of my hesitation to hire him because of his talent and credentials, my concern was that he would not be willing to stay at the CHA. Well, speaking of history, the CHA has long felt it necessary to adopt policies of affirmative action and DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Spearheading those efforts was our longtime Director of Human Resources, otherwise known as the voice of the CHA, the now sadly deceased Clive Godwin. I think the result of this policy and Clive's implementation of it has resulted in a CHA staff which I truly believe is one of, if not the best public housing staff in the USA. Swallow that, critics of DEI. Lest I forget, we should also recognize and thank members of the CHA Fiscal Department, which after Elspeth Taylor was well served by Paul Johnson, Balaji Atawolagon, Betsy Lindsley, and Joe DeMombro, among others. And during my tenure, we have been served by several lawyers in that position of general counsel. I'm sorry. I want to start by saying also a housing authority is more dependent than ever these days upon lawyers. Multi-funding sources, regulatory challenges are so much more frequent and necessary these days. And the CHA has been so very fortunate to have been served by excellent general counsels, starting with Howard Cohen. During my tenure, we have been served by several lawyers in that position, including the outstanding Hollis Young, who is here. And most recently, Sue Cohen, whose, quote, protection of CHA's interests and innovative insights into various possibilities afforded us under the Moving to Work program have meant so much. Thank you, Sue, for your remarkable service. And speaking of talent, many years ago we hired a very young woman named Brenda Snowden.
Yes, Brenda.
As a secretary to our general counsel. This young woman, now Brenda Snowden Downing, has risen over the years to being a deputy to CEO Mike Johnston. Congratulations, and thank you, Brenda. Lest I forget, we should also recognize, as we certainly must not forget to mention and thank some of the most valuable staff responsible for daily success. The executive director's secretaries.
Yes.
Initially, Mary Hickey Morris, then Pam Mullen, and the like no other, Shirley Sanford. And finally, a shout out to CHA's unique tenant services department, headed for many years by the very special and innovative founder of the CHA workforce, Steve Swanger. Steve and John Lindemood recently hosted a celebration of the 40-year anniversary of the workforce program. And that program focuses on the education of our young residents in a truly unique and formative way. Many of the workforce success stories featured in its 40-year anniversary event are truly remarkable, with graduates now in teaching positions, important corporate roles, and a current city councilor. Before closing, I should also recognize some of the CHA's resident leaders who have so importantly contributed to CHA's success. During my tenure, resident leaders like Josie Avakian of Jefferson Park, Lois Jones of Putnam Gardens, Alice Pedro of Roosevelt Towers, Ruth Shea of Corcoran Park, served indispensable roles leading up to the rehabilitation or redevelopment of their complexes. And special thanks belong to Clore Evertez of Roosevelt Towers, who made the redevelopment and reuse of the tower building possible against significant obstacles. And the groundbreaking and complete redevelopment of Washington Elms would never have happened without the resilience of Florence West and Wilhelmina Gosman, as well as the leadership of City Councilor and State Representative Sandra Graham. Well, folks, that is the wonderful team that exists in the less than 100% of my functional memory. I'm sure that I've left out several such important contributors of CHA's success, so please forgive any omissions. In closing, let me reiterate how lucky I feel to have been part of this wonderful team. And let me express my gratitude and wonder at the great team that Mike Johnston and the current board of directors have assembled, and the success that team is having these difficult days. And thanks so much for your kind recognition of my tenure, and mostly thanks for the great work that you are currently doing with your team. Thank you. Multitudinous hair.
There you are.
Pull it. Hey.
I'm absolutely blown away by the beauty of this whole event, and I can't thank the Housing Authority enough for what they've just done. The time spent in Cambridge was just so rewarding to me.
One word to describe how you feel right now.
Let me think. Surreal? Yeah, surreal.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Congratulations.
Okay, thank you.